The studio lights were hotter than I remembered. Or maybe that was just the heat radiating off my brother's face. I was sitting in the third row, hidden in the shadows of the studio audience, watching the recording of the Venture tank. Center stage stood Mark. He looked like the cover of a Fortune 500 magazine. Tailored navy suit, teeth whitened to a blinding degree, and a confidence that bordered on narcissism. He was pitching Vantage, my app, the logistics platform I had spent 18 months building in a windowless room while he was out networking at golf clubs. He was asking for $5 million for a 10% stake. The 5 billionaire investors, the sharks, were leaning in. They were hooked. Mark was charismatic. He was selling them a dream of automated trucking fleets and billions in savings. He was moments away from the deal of a lifetime. The lead investor, a man known for destroying weak businesses, leaned forward. "Mark," he said, "this sounds incredible. But the interface, I need to see it handle a live stress test. Can you run the simulation right now?" Mark didn't hesitate. He flashed that winning smile. "Of course. Watch the screen behind me." Mark tapped the tablet podium. He expected to see the beautiful, sleek dashboard I had designed. He expected to see graphs going up and green lights flashing. Instead, the 80-inch monitor behind him flickered. The blue branding vanished. The screen turned a violent, flashing red. A digital alarm began to screech through the studio speakers, loud enough to make the investors jump in their chairs. A countdown timer appeared on the screen. T-minus 10 seconds TO database purge. Mark froze. He tapped the tablet frantically. Just a glitch," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Technical difficulties." He didn't know it wasn't a glitch. He didn't know that exactly 3 weeks ago, after he locked me out of the building, I had modified the kernel. He wasn't pitching a business. He was standing on a landmine, and I was holding the detonator. To understand why I was willing to burn down a potential billion-dollar company on live television, you have to understand the dynamic between Mark and me. It started when we were kids. Mark was the golden child. He was the quarterback, the prom king, the one who could charm a teacher into changing a grade. I was David, the quiet one, the one who took apart the toaster to see how it worked and put it back together before Mom noticed. Our parents fed into it. To them, Mark was a leader, and I was support staff. Mark was the CEO. I was the IT department. 2 years ago, I came up with the idea for Vantage. I had been working in supply chain management for a mid-sized shipping firm, and I saw the waste. Trucks driving empty, warehouses overflowing with the wrong stock. The inefficiency was costing the industry billions. I wrote the first lines of code on a Saturday night. By Monday morning, I knew I had something that could change the world. I made the mistake of showing Mark. He was working in real estate sales at the time. Mediocre sales, I should add. But he saw the dollar signs immediately. "Davey," he said, putting a hand on my shoulder. "This is it. This is our ticket. You build it, I'll sell it. We'll be partners. 50/50ths. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my big brother. For 18 months, I ceased to exist as a human being. I quit my job. I moved into a small studio apartment to save money. I coded for 16 hours a day, surviving on instant coffee and fear. I built the algorithms that predicted shipping routes. I built the driver interface. I built the security protocols. Mark built his wardrobe. He registered the LLC. He told me, "Don't worry about the paperwork, Dave. It's boring legal stuff. You focus on the tech. I'll handle the boring stuff." I signed whatever he put in front of me. I didn't read the fine print. I trusted him. The betrayal didn't happen all at once. It was a slow creep. First, he stopped inviting me to meetings with potential clients. "They're just money guys, Dave. You'd be bored. Plus, you're not exactly a people person." Then, he started putting his name on the design documents. "It looks better to investors if there's one clear visionary," he claimed. The breaking point came 3 months ago. The beta version was finished. It was flawless. We had a pilot program running with a regional trucking company, and their efficiency had jumped 40% in 2 weeks. We were ready for the big leagues. I showed up to the office, a small co-working space we rented, at 7 a.m. on a Monday. I swiped my keycard. Access denied. I swiped it again. Nothing. The little light stayed red. I knocked on a glass door. I could see Mark inside. He was sitting at the conference table with two men I didn't recognize. They were wearing expensive suits. Mark looked up, saw me, and didn't even smile. He just checked his watch, stood up, and walked to the door. He opened a crack. He didn't let me in. "Mark, my card isn't working," I said, confused. "I know," he said. His voice was cold, indifferent. "We need to talk. Let's go to the coffee shop across the street." We sat in a booth. He didn't buy me a coffee. He folded his hands on the table and looked at me like I was an employee he was laying off. "David," he began, "we're moving into a new phase. The growth phase. The investors I'm talking to, they want a certain image, a certain pedigree." "What are you talking about?" I asked. "We're restructuring," he said. "The company is pivoting. And frankly, your code is good, but it's messy. We're bringing in a professional team from Silicon Valley to clean it up. We don't need you anymore." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "Don't need me? I build it. It's my code." Mark smirked. That arrogant, golden child smirk. "Actually, David, if you read the employment contract you signed, all IP created during your tenure belongs to Vantage LLC. And since I am the sole proprietor of Vantage LLC, it's my code. You were just a contractor. We're partners," I whispered. "Not on paper," he said. He slid an envelope across the table. "There's a check in there for $10,000. Consider it a severance package. It's more than you deserve, considering how long you took to finish the beta." He stood up and buttoned his blazer. "Don't come back to the office, David. If you try to log in, we'll sue you for hacking. Good luck." I drove to my parents' house that night, shaking, tears of rage in my eyes. I told them everything. I expected outrage. I expected my father to storm over to Mark's house. Instead, my mother poured tea inside. "David, honey, you have to understand. Mark is a businessman. Maybe he's right. Maybe you're not cut out for the high-pressure world. You should be happy for him. He's going to make the family name famous. He stole from me." I screamed. "He's taking the business to the next level." My father grunted from his armchair. "Don't be jealous, son. It's unbecoming. Take the 10 grand and find a nice IT job." That was the moment the sadness died, and the cold, hard calculation began. I didn't cash the check. Cashing the check will be accepting the settlement. I went back to my apartment and sat in the dark for 3 days. I didn't sleep. I replayed every conversation, every contract, every moment of trust one had wasted on them. Then, I turned on my computer. Mark was right about one thing. He owned the LLC. Legally, he had trapped me. If I sued him now, it would be my word against his ironclad contracts. He would use the company's money to drag me through court until I was bankrupt. But Mark was wrong about the most important thing. He thought he understood the product. He didn't understand the product. He understood the interface. He understood the pretty buttons and the graphs. He knew nothing about the engine room. I still had my local backups. I couldn't log into the live server anymore. He had revoked my admin credentials immediately, but I knew the architecture of that system better than I knew the back of my hand. I remembered something I had installed 6 months prior, a security measure. At the time, I was paranoid about corporate espionage. I was worried someone might steal our servers. So, I wrote a subroutine deep in the kernel of the operating system. It was a heartbeat protocol. It was a dead man's switch. The system required a specific, encrypted biometric ping from my personal laptop every 30 days. It was a maintenance check. If the system received the ping, it continued running smoothly. If it didn't receive the ping, the system would assume it had been stolen or compromised. I checked the logs on my backup. The last ping was sent 28 days ago. Mark had fired me 2 days before the next scheduled ping. He had no idea it existed. The professional team from Silicon Valley he bragged about, they wouldn't find it either. It was buried under layers of compiled legacy code that I had written in a custom shorthand. Unless they rebuilt the entire app from scratch, which would take a year, they were sitting on a ticking time bomb. I looked at the calendar. In 2 days, the system would look for my handshake. When it didn't find it, the default protocol was simply to lock the database and display a contact administrator error. That wasn't enough. A locked database is an inconvenience. Mark would spin it. He would blame it on a server outage. He would lie. I needed something catastrophic. I realized I still had one back door. It wasn't an admin login. It was a developer debug port I had left open for emergency patching. It was read-only, usually, but if I knew the specific sequence of packet headers, I could inject a small command. I sat there, staring at the screen. I could save the company right now. I could email Mark, tell him about the switch, and beg for my job back. Then I saw a notification pop up on my phone. A LinkedIn post from Mark. It was a photo of him standing in front of a private jet. The caption read, "Taking Vantage to the skies. Hard work pays off when you have the vision. Hashtag self-made, hashtag techmogul, hashtag no handouts." No handouts. I cracked my knuckles. I opened the terminal. I wasn't going to turn the switch off. I was going to weaponize it. I rewrote the failure protocol. I didn't just want it to lock. I wanted it to self-destruct. But I needed the timing to be perfect. I did some digging. Mark wasn't just flying anywhere. He was flying to Los Angeles. I checked the trade news. The Venture Tank was filming its season finale this week. Rumors were swirling about a revolutionary logistics startup being featured. It was Mark. He was going to sell my work to the world. I checked the filming schedule. The Tech Day recordings were scheduled for Thursday. That was exactly 30 days since my last ping. I modified the code. I set the timer. If the biometric handshake wasn't received by 2 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday, right when he would be on stage, the system would execute a command I named Judgment Day. The next 48 hours were a blur of agonizing patience. I flew to Los Angeles on my own dime. I cashed out my 401k to buy a ticket. I needed to be there. I managed to get a seat in the studio audience through a friend of a friend who worked in production. I told them I was a supporter from the hometown. Meanwhile, Mark was on a victory lap. He was featured in a TechCrunch article. The Steve Jobs of logistics, they called him. The article mentioned me once. David, a former contractor, helped with the early prototypes. My mother called me the night before the taping. I was sitting in a cheap motel room in Burbank. "David," she said, her voice dripping with that passive-aggressive sweetness. I saw Mark's Instagram. He's so nervous about the show. It would mean a lot to him if he sent a good luck text. A good luck text? I asked, gripping the phone. "He stole my life's work, Mom." "Oh, stop being dramatic," she snapped. "Business is business. You know, if you play your cards right, Mark might hire you back as a customer service rep. He told me he's willing to be generous if you apologize for the scene you made." Apologize? I laughed. A cold, dry laugh. "Tell him I'll be watching. Tell him I wouldn't miss it for the world." "Well, I hope you're proud of your brother," she said, and hung up. I stared at the phone. Proud. I checked my laptop. The connection to the server was still live. The heartbeat protocol was waiting. It was hungry. The morning of the taping, I put on my best blazer. I shaved. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the basement-dwelling coder anymore. I looked like a man who was about to collect a debt. I arrived at the studio. The energy was electric. The producers hyped up the crowd. "We want big reactions," they yelled. "When someone gets a deal, you cheer. When someone fails, you groan." I sat in the third row. Mark walked out. The crowd applauded. He looked perfect. He had that rehearsed humble brag walk down. He shook hands with the Sharks. I checked my watch. 1:55 p.m. Mark began his pitch. "Sharks, imagine a world where no truck ever drives empty. Imagine a world where logistics isn't a cost center, but a profit engine." He was good. I had to give him that. He was reciting the lines I wrote for our original pitch deck, but he delivered them with a salesman's flair. Cuban looked interested. "What's the proprietary tech here?" "Everyone has algorithms." "That's the magic," Mark said, tapping his chest. "I developed a predictive engine that learns from traffic patterns in real time. It's called the Vantage core. I developed. Every time he said, it felt like a needle in my eye. The negotiation started. They were haggling over valuation. Mark was greedy. He wanted a $50 million valuation. "I'll give you the $5 million, said the lead investor. "But I need to know this isn't vaporware. I've been burned by tech bros before. Show me it works. Now. Live." I checked my watch. 2:01 p.m. The automated ping from my laptop in the motel room had not been sent. The server had checked for the handshake at 2 p.m. exactly. It had found silence. The logic gate opened. The Judgment Day script began to execute. "Watch the screen," Mark said, pointing behind him. The giant screen, which had been displaying the Vantage logo, flickered. Mark kept smiling for a second, not realizing what was happening behind him. The audience gasped. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. The screen turned that violent, blood red. System compromised. Mark turned around. His smile faltered. "Oh, 1 second. Just a display error." He tapped his tablet, rebooting the interface. Nothing happened. The red screen pulsed. Then, text began to scroll. Large, white, terminal font text. It wasn't an error code. It was a narrative. Warning. Unauthorized user detected. License violation. Class A. Ownership dispute. Activated. "What is this?" the lead investor asked, standing up. "Mark, is this part of the pitch?" I don't know," Mark said, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "Someone is hacking us. We're being hacked." The text continued to scroll. Deleting customer database. Complete. Deleting routing algorithms. Complete. Deleting financial records. Complete. "Turn it off," Mark screamed at the production crew. "Cut the feed." But I had locked the system at the kernel level. The display output was hard-coded. They couldn't turn it off without unplugging the entire studio's power. Then came the final message. The message I'd spent all night drafting. System lockdown initiated. Reason: theft of intellectual property. Primary architect: David, last name. Status: betrayed. Solution: insert original owner to restore. The studio was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. The words primary architect, David, burned on the screen. Mark looked small. He looked terrified. He looked at the sharks, who were now looking at him with a mix of confusion and disgust. "Mark," the lead investor said, his voice icy. "Who is David?" Mark stammered. He's just a disgruntled ex-employee. A coder we fired for incompetence. This is cyber terrorism. I'll have him arrested." I stood up. I didn't shout. I didn't run. I just stood up in the quiet studio and buttoned my blazer. "I'm David," I said. My voice carried. The camera crew, instinctively, swung a camera toward me. Mark saw me. His face went pale white, like he'd seen a ghost. "David," he whispered. I walked down the aisle. Security started to move toward me, but the lead investor held up a hand. "Wait," he commanded. "Let him speak." I walked right up to the edge of the stage. I looked Mark in the eye. He was trembling. "It's not a hack, Mark," I said calmly. "It's a feature. It's the founder's protocol. It detects when the creator of the system has been locked out of his own creation." I turned to the sharks. "He told you he built the Vantage core. He told you he wrote the code. Ask him to open the command line and stop the deletion. If he wrote it, he knows the syntax." The lead investor turned to Mark. "Well, fix it." Mark stared at the tablet. He poked at it uselessly. He didn't even know how to open the terminal. He was a salesman trying to fly a spaceship. I need to call my tech team," Mark whimpered. "You don't have a tech team," I said. "You fired him 3 weeks ago." I looked at the big screen. The deletion bar was at 90%. "In 10 seconds, I said to the sharks, the source code wipes itself. The backups are already gone. The company becomes worth $0. Can you stop it?" the lead investor asked me. "Yes," I said. "Do it." "Not for him," I said, pointing at Mark. The shark looked at Mark, then at me. He was a ruthless businessman, but he respected leverage, and I had all of it. "Mark," the shark said, "you're out." "What?" Mark shrieked. "You're out. You defrauded us. You claimed ownership of tech you don't control. Step away from the podium." Mark looked at the investors, then at the audience, then at me. He was ruined. He stepped back, slumped, defeated. I stepped onto the stage. I took the tablet. I typed in a simple 12-character string. CMD, restore_justice. The red screen vanished. Instantly, the beautiful, blue dashboard appeared. The graphs populated. The data deleted. Message was replaced with, "System restored." "Welcome back, David." The audience erupted. It wasn't planned. They just cheered. The episode aired unedited. The producers knew TV gold when they saw it. The fallout for Mark was absolute. The venture tank investors didn't just pass on the deal, they blacklisted him. The fraud he committed, soliciting investment based on stolen IP, triggered an investigation by the SEC. Because Mark had used the initial seed money to pay for his lifestyle instead of the company, he was personally liable. He lost his condo. He lost his car. He's currently working as a junior sales rep for a solar panel company, cold calling people who hang up on him. My parents try to backtrack. My mother called me the day after the show aired. David, we were so proud of you. We always knew you were the genius behind it all. Mark is just confused. You should help him. I hung up. I haven't spoken to them since. As for me, the Sharks didn't invest in Vantage LLC. That company was toxic. Instead, they funded a new entity, Vantage Prime. I own 51% of the company. The Sharks put in $10 million for the rest. We just hit our Series B funding. The company is valued at $200 million. I hired a new sales guy last week. He's great. He knows the product, he's humble, and he knows exactly who runs the show. Mark wanted to be famous. I made sure he got his wish. He's now the most famous example of what not to do in Silicon Valley history. Sometimes, the fine print really does matter, especially when the fine print is written in C++.